there was sunshine.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah,
things
yeah.
getting better in Israel?
Temperature wise?
Well, like with COVID and opening
Oh,
up.
yeah. Oh, Israel is doing great. They have, yeah, their vaccination rate, I forget what it is. They're down to vaccinating, teenagers. They've got people really covered. And I think the number of serious cases has dropped precipitously, and they're doing really well. So
Good.
they are planning, I think, the end of May to open up to groups for tours. And as I said last week, we've got our women's trip is rescheduled for October, and that they'll be able to keep track of us, keep track of Kathy and me, where we're going there, so they know what we're doing in case they need to find us. So yes, okay, let me just let in Eileen and Marsha. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Hello, Eileen. Hello, Marsha. Hello, Lisa coming in. It's good to see you all. So here we are. We are in a double portion this week. We are on the parsha of Achrei Mot and Kedoshim. Achrei Mot is primarily the parsha that deals with the Yom Kippur ritual. So it feels a little funny to be having Yom Kippur in April, but there you go. That's where we are. So we are in Yom Kippur. And I wanted to talk about a specific word. And this is from a beautiful shir by Rabbi Taub. And I hadn't heard of him before, but I listened to him and I thought it was just so interesting and so helpful and inspiring, and especially inspiring in the context of where we are in the counting of the Omer. So in Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, as we know, we're counting the 49 days, the 7 weeks that take us from Pesach to Shavuot. And during that time, each week we have a theme. And the theme for this week is the theme of Netzach. The word Netzach literally means to prevail, to win, or eternality. So one of the names of God is Netzach Netzachim, the eternal one, eternally eternal. So that Netzach means not necessarily just to win, like win the battle, but to win the war. Even though in Israel today, if you are on a soccer team and you win a game, which is just one game, you would say Netzachnu or Netzachti, we won. So it does mean to win, but it really has to do more with being able to win and prevail completely, not just the temporary. Though we know that the way you get a long-term win is to have a lot of short-term wins, because the way you get to a long-term win is by having moment by moment wins. You can't do a war in all one step. It's done through individual battles. But our goal is to get to this ultimate idea of Netzach, of eternality. So we're going to talk about some things that are eternal, what is eternal and what's not eternal. But we're going to do it in the context of a very interesting, seemingly superfluous word in the parsha of Achrei Mot. So if you happen to have a chumash, and you have this one, the stone, it is page 637. If you don't, it's chapter 16, and it is in verse 3. Verse 3 opens up, and this is about the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, going into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, going into the holiest place by the holiest person. And this is the description. It says, with this shall Aaron come into the sanctuary. And then it proceeds to say, with a young bull, sin offering, an elevation offering, etc. But the commentaries note immediately that it says with this. And the Hebrew word with, for where it says that, is bezot. Bezot yavo Aharon. With this will Aaron come in. What's interesting is bezot is kind of a dangling thing. There's interesting understandings. I'll just share one other one. So zot is feminine, as opposed to zeh. Zez masculine, Zot is feminine. So one understanding is that the Kohen Gadol had to be married, and the bezot that he came in with was his wife. Now that didn't mean that his wife went into the Holy of Holies with him. It meant that he needed to be married in order to be the Kohen Gadol, to go into the Holy of Holies. That was considered, for a man to be complete, that he needed to have a wife. And especially if you were the holiest man. So it's kind of interesting because it's the opposite of like our Christian folks, that first, like that for Catholic, that to be the holiest is you're not married. To be the Pope, I think can't be the Pope if you're married. So ours is the opposite, that in order to be the holiest person, you needed to be married. So the bezot, meaning feminine, meaning he had to have a wife. So that's just one common understanding of what that means. But what I want to talk about is something else, which is related to the gematria, the numerical equivalent of this word. So the numerical equivalent of the word bezot equals 410. 410, how do we get that? So bet is 2, Zion is 7, Aleph is 1, and Taf is 400. 410. It says, what does that mean? With 410, he went into the Holy of Holies. Interestingly, it says, what's 410? It says 410 is the number of years that the first temple stood in Jerusalem before it was destroyed. 410 years. It says the Kohen went into the temple, into the Mishkan, which was the precursor of the temple. And it says that he went in with this idea of the temple is going to stand for 410 years and then it's going to be destroyed. So what kind of a thing is that? I mean, that's your message. And with knowing that the temple's going to stand for 410 years and then it's going to be destroyed and you're out of here and it's over and done, that's what you go into the Holy of Holies with on Yom Kippur. It's like, first of all, that's weird. Second of all, that's depressing. It's like, what do you mean? You're telling me like this is, it's like saying, I just want you to know that this is your future. There's nothing you can do about it. Everything's going to be destroyed and that's the way it's going to be, period. Like, why would you even tell me that? Why would you tell me something like that? And why would you tell me that on this very sacred day of Yom Kippur? And why is it with that I go into the Holy of Holies? Because what did the Kohen Gadol do on Yom Kippur was for forgiveness for the entire Jewish people. It's like, that message doesn't even make any sense. So we have to ask the question, what does this mean? And why would somebody say this? So now we know, or even as a better question, so for all the years before the temple was built, did they read this verse in the Torah knowing like, okay, now it's been 5 years, now it's been 10 years, only, 400 years left of the temple, only 390 years left of the temple, only 350. Was it a countdown to ultimate destruction? And this place where it was going to be for sure a ruin? Says, what does that even mean? We need to understand that even when there is something that says that for sure something bad is going to happen, we don't accept it. We don't accept it. And this is the most heartening, inspiring message that we could hear. What does this mean? What this means is that it's very easy to come to a place where we give up on ourselves. Give up on ourselves, give up on other people, and say they're too far gone. It's not going to work. Nothing can help. I've done too much bad. I'm too lowly. There's no place for me to go. God doesn't want me anymore. I'm done with the relationship. It says we are never, ever, 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 ever supposed to think that or buy into that message. And what's more, it says, even if there is a voice from heaven itself that comes out and says, God is done with you, that we say we don't listen to it. Now that's pretty strange because usually we say, if God tells us something, we listen. So we listen to everything that God says other than I'm done with you. If God says I'm done with you, we say I'm not listening to you. So if God's not done with us and we don't listen to that, for sure, we shouldn't be saying that we are done with ourselves. It says, how do we know this language? How do we even have this idea? It's a pretty chutzpahdik thing to say. Normally, if God says something, that there's been judgment passed against you in a heavenly court or whatever it might be, we would say, if you said that, then okay, I guess that's true. So, but we don't accept that. So how do we understand that? And where do we see an example of it? This is the first time we see an example of that. Well, we see a number of examples all the way going back to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, when God tells Abraham that he's going to destroy Sodom because of their wickedness. Abraham's like, but wait, you can't do that. And he starts in arguing with God. It's like, you would think like, oh, God must have made some sort of a heavenly calculation. They deserve death. And so I should say, I understand, God, you need to do what you need to do. But Abraham does not accept that. Says we don't accept that. The next time we see it is from Moshe in a very kind of strange way. After the sin of the golden calf, and this is on, hold on 1 second, this is on page 97. And let me just turn back to that. Hold on 1 sec. 497, verses 1 through 10. God is telling Moshe, they've made themselves a molten calf, they've prostrated themselves to it and sacrificed to it, and they said, this is your God. And Hashem said to Moshe, I have seen this people, and behold, it's a stiff-necked people. So we're kind of familiar with that part of the speech. And then God says something very interesting in verse 10. He says, and now desist from me, which means stop bothering me. Don't stop saying anything. Let my anger flare up against them, and I shall annihilate them, and I shall make you a great nation. So there's just one interesting thing. Moshe hadn't said anything yet. Moshe hadn't said, don't do it, save them, forgive them. Moshe hasn't said anything. Moshe's just finding out about the problem. So this would be like somebody saying, like, it's such a strange thing, as if somebody said, okay, Lisa, I'm just going to call on you. Lisa, okay, I don't want you to say anything to me about this at all, but you haven't said anything to me. Like, stop saying anything to me. Says, what does that mean? I wasn't saying anything. So Moshe understood that as an invitation that he should say something. And so he does. And then he starts pleading with God. And then he starts in and he says, verse 11, Moses pleaded before Hashem, his God, and said, why should your anger flare up against your people? So God starts to get angry and says, don't say anything to me about this. I don't want to hear from you. And Moshe's like, I actually hadn't said anything, but now that you mention it, so it's kind of like a beckoning with God, say something, say something. And so then Moshe starts to plead. And the question is this a game? Like, I say I'm going to kill them, I'm going to destroy them, and then you are supposed to plead? Is that just to see, like, how much do you care? It says a very interesting dynamic happens. It says whenever there is wrongdoing in a relationship, there needs to be something fixed. But there's a danger that a relationship becomes transactional. Well, if I do this, then they'll forgive me, and then it'll be okay, and we're back to an equilibrium. And it's more about an external aspect of the relationship. I remember in dealing with this and understanding this in domestic abuse. And it was specifically for programs that were aimed at men. I mean, I know there are women who abuse also, but this was aimed at men. And the person who was in charge of the program, who said they could always tell who was going to be successfully rehabilitated and who wasn't. The person who said, or the man who said to his wife, what do I need to do to, like, come back home? That kind of person was not going to be successful. The other person was a person who's be like, I want to be the person who you would want to have a relationship with, because you are so important to me, and I will do whatever it needs, whatever it takes, even if we don't have the relationship, because I want to fix me. Well, I want to be back together again, but I don't want to be like, okay, so the negotiation is like kind of like the difference between what's it going to take to get you to take me back versus I want to be the person who can be close to you. Those are two different places of being. One is considered an essential aspect of the relationship, and one is considered a little bit more superficial. So is there an expression in a relationship of, I love you, I want to be with you, and I know that my actions are really completely unacceptable, and it's true. According to heavenly accounting, I come up short. I know that what I've done is really awful, but I love you. It says to get to that point is to get to the point where we say, I don't care what you say, I just want you. And that was the place that Moshe had to get to with God for the Jewish people of we just want to be with you. And Moshe doesn't even tell God anything about how great the Jewish people are. It's like they just want to be with you. And that becomes like the essence of the relationship. It says never give up, never give up, never think that the relationship with God for sure or the relationship with ourselves is over. So it gives a really interesting example going back, and it says that there was actually, let's give you another example. There was a king named Hiskiyahu, and at one point, the prophet Isaiah came to him because God had sent him, the prophet Isaiah, we have a whole book of Isaiah, had sent him to say, go tell King Hiskiyahu that he's going to get sick and die. And so Isaiah comes and tells him that, and Hiskiyahu says, I don't accept it. It's like, are you kidding? This is the prophet Isaiah coming with God's word saying you're going to die because you did something wrong. And Hiskiyahu says, like, I don't accept it. And so he starts to just pray, and he says, like what's the problem? Is it because you didn't have children and you should have tried to have children? He goes, but I know from a prophecy that I'm going to have a child and the child's going to be wicked, and so I thought I'm sparing God a wicked child. And he says, like, you don't do that. You do what you're supposed to do, which is try to have children. That's your responsibility. God takes care of God's responsibility. So Hiskiyahu says, okay, he will have children. He is healed from his illness and he doesn't die. So the question is, it says, what gave him the chutzpah to say, I'm not listening to you. I'm not listening to a decree that all is over, that it's a hopeless situation. It says, this is this idea of bezot, of going into the Holy of Holies, where I have been told that there's a heavenly accounting that the first temple is only going to stand for 410 years and that's a decree and there's nothing I can do about it, then why bother? If somebody tells you that, this whole project that you're involved with, it's going to completely fall apart and end, I'd say that would normally be depressing, distressing, and more, immobilizing, something demoralizing. You'd be like, what's the point? It says, don't accept it. Don't accept it, because what it really is an invitation to go deeper into why you want what it is you want. Why do you really want the relationship? What is really there? What are you really trying to accomplish? And then when we get to that level, then it's not logical. Like, it's not really logical if somebody has really done things that are wrong. In a way, it's not really logical to forgive them. But if you say, I want the relationship, there's nothing that means more to me than you, then it's tapping into a level that is deeper. This deeper place of relationship is called the not giving up. So when we don't give up on ourselves, it's like, why do we give up on ourselves? Why do we give up on anybody? Think about somebody like a parent or a teacher or a friend or something. Like, why would we give up on somebody? Because we don't think that there's any potential. We don't think it's going to work. It says giving up the hope is the biggest sin of all. It says don't give up. So then this was even stranger. It says, we know that the temple was destroyed after 410 years, but that's not necessarily what that 410 meant. All it meant was, on the surface, it said, after 410 years, that will be the end of the first temple. We know that it was destroyed, but does anybody have, what else could there have been after the 410 years? Any ideas? What could there have been after the 410 years other than the destruction? Feel free to unmute if you have an idea.
The rebuilding.
Great. Okay. It could have been, and even taking your idea, even just one step beyond that, is it could be a rebuilding. It could be like somebody who lives in a house is be like, I'm living in this house is only going to be here for, 36 years. And I'm like, oh my God, it's being destroyed. It's like, did I say it was being destroyed? I said that was going to be here for 36 years. I didn't say that maybe you're going to pop the top, maybe you're going to build out, maybe you're going to do something and make it better. It didn't have to be negative. So even when we hear something like it's going to be the end, well, the truth is the end of anything gives us the opportunity to have the beginning of something else. It doesn't have to be that it ended because it was a disaster. And even if it was somewhat of a disaster, I mean, even a rebuilding project, when they do a scrape off, okay, so there's a house on the corner of Monaco and 6th Avenue. It's scraped off. Now, do we say, oh my gosh, they destroyed their house? I was like, well, yes, it is down, but that's because they're building something else in its place that's, hopefully, I hope, better. It's updated or whatever. It's going to be an improvement. So we don't even know what this means. And so sometimes, there's, especially in the, I don't know, in the Christian world, for sure, there's a lot of things that prophecies, the doom and gloom, the world's going to end, and all these things are going to happen. It's like, just because something's going to end doesn't mean that it's ending poorly or that there's not something better that is coming along. We see this with the prophet Jonah. On Yom Kippur, same thing. On Yom Kippur afternoon, when we read Jonah, God tells Jonah that he needs to give the message to the city of Nineveh that after 40 days, that he's going to overturn the city. Now, Jonah thinks it means overturn as in like destroy it. But then the people do teshuvah, they repent, and God doesn't destroy them. And then Jonah's mad. He's like, you said you were going to destroy them. He said, I didn't say I was going to destroy them. I said I was going to turn them over, overturn them. So overturn and turning, it's like turning over a new leaf. If you turn something over, that doesn't necessarily mean that something was going to be bad. It could mean that it's going to be good or that it's going to be better. So this idea is that even when there's a prophecy, even when there's something saying, and we're going downhill, I can see it. The handwriting's on the wall, it's going down. It's like, what does that mean? It could mean bezot. It could mean 410 years. It stood for 110 years, and then there would be another one. The fact that ours got destroyed and it had a negative side to it, that was not a given. It was the only thing that was given is that it would last for 410 years. Whether it was going in a positive direction or a negative direction was up to us. But the 410, that was set. So like, this can only last for another limited amount of time, does not mean that it has to go downhill. But primarily for us, it is to not give up on ourselves, not give up on humanity, not give up on other people, not give up on all sorts of things that I think a lot of people are feeling like they're giving up on. There's a lot of, like, I've had it, I'm done, the world's going downhill fast. It's like, maybe it is, but there's something that is also, we are always in the process of going to an ultimate completion that God has in mind for us. And with that in mind, then the high priest going into this Holy of Holies, bezot, you need to know this concept called 410. And you need to know and have confidence, because of the whole point of going into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur was to seek atonement for the Jewish people. What if you went in? I mean, it's enough to go in with your own stuff, but you go in for the entire people. You could think like, oy vey, like, look at us, we are hopeless. How is God ever going to forgive us? It's like, well, the only way we get there is by saying, we may not deserve it. We really may not deserve it. According to a heavenly calculation, we don't. But we want the relationship with you, God. That's all I can say, is we want the relationship. And at some level, that bond, that's called the highest level of the soul. So maybe have you heard that there are 5 levels of the soul that we have? That there's the nefesh, which is the life force. There's the ruach, which is more like the emotional level. Then there's the chaya, and then there's the neshama, and then there's what's called the yechida. The yechida comes from the word yichud, or echad, meaning one. So, and it's not the logical part. It's like when you get down to the essence of the essence of the essence, it's like, I just want to be connected. It's true at those other levels, I don't have the merit. I don't have the merit. I'm not doing so well. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I want the relationship. And that this is what the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies with, is with this concept on behalf of the Jewish people. So we can use this word for ourselves and say, bezot. It's like, there is a process. I should never give up on myself. And truly, even if a heavenly voice came out and you received, though, let me know if you do receive this. I'm not sure you will, but in case you do receive an actual letter from God that says, I've given up on you, guess what we do with that? We tear it up. So it's like, no, I don't accept that. So it says we're supposed to do everything that God tells us to do, except if he tells us to leave. And then we say, I'm not leaving. So I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving you. I want you. And that at that level, we tap into another dimension of the relationship. So this goes so beautifully with the whole idea of netzach, of that quality that means to hang in there and to prevail and to not give up. And how do we do that? How do we not give up? How do we maintain the inspiration to keep us focused? So I'd like to hear what people are thinking of when you think about, how do you stick to something? How do we stay motivated? How do we overcome obstacles? How do we get ourselves beyond the initial excitement of whatever it is we're doing to really stick to something? What is it that we do to help us do that? Some of you may be professionals in this, and whatever insights you have, we'd really like to hear, to share with everybody of what are some of the ways that we can do that. If anybody has a thought, feel free to unmute, and I'd like to hear what you think of something in your own life that has been helpful to you. Anybody have
Baby steps.
baby steps? Okay. Kathy, do you have any examples from your own life of things like that where that was really relevant for you?
Well, just this year, step by step, stay home at first, wear your mask, wash your hands, keep your hands off your face, learn how to do Zoom so you can stay connected to people, and then, get the shot as soon as you can, get the vaccine, and be very careful.
That's great. Great. I think that's true that we've had to all develop a tremendous amount of perseverance this year.
Yep.
And I think different people have done, have been more challenged than others. And I know different
Absolutely.
circumstances for sure that have made it harder. But even just for average person whose life is fine, just the challenge of those baby steps. And it really brings us to a combination approach of maintaining optimism that things are going to get better, and at the same time realizing that there are specific steps that I need to take now, but that I'm building towards something, to whatever that's going to be, which we don't even know what that is. But to know that I have there are certain things I can do today. I mean, I was for myself, there was some things going on over which I have no control whatsoever. And I just woke up in the morning, and first I woke up, I had such a sense of heaviness about me, like, like this, whatever, these different things happening. And I'm like, okay, so what can I control? I'm like, okay, I can control whether I go downstairs and exercise. I can control what I'm eating. I can control what I'm reading. I can control what I'm talking about. I can control, and by the time I got done, I was like, oh, you know what the truth is? I actually have a whole lot that I can control. And it's easy to be overwhelmed by the obstacles when they're right in front of our face, and when they especially are so unwelcome. So taking baby steps with whatever we can do, and realizing that we only have to do, like Kathy said, baby steps, one day at a time. I wrote a thing for the Jewish News. They asked me to write about Pesach this year and Pesach last year. I started off by saying, I'm glad I didn't know. I'm glad I didn't know last year that we were going to be doing this for a year plus, because sometimes knowing what the challenges are going to be, having too much information is not necessarily helpful. Instead, we went, I remember when our shul, maybe also many of you, when our shul first shut down, they said, we're shutting down for 2 weeks. I mean, what did we know? We thought we were going to be shut down for 2 weeks. Now it's been a year and however many months. And it's like, if they would have said that up front, we're going to be closing for the next 14 months, I think everybody would have completely freaked out. This way, like, we didn't really know. So sometimes when we say that we want to know, if I only know, if I could know, it's like, no, actually, sometimes it's easier to not know what the challenges are going to be and just encounter it day by day, step by step, and just do what's in front of you and let it unfold as it goes. Hey, other thoughts or ideas from people? Yes, Dorothy Resnick.
For me, if I have a vision of what I want to achieve or I want, and I have to really want it, if it's something that's in my soul, if it's something I want to travel, if it's I wanted to move here, if it's buying a car, I have to have that vision, and then I have to want to do it enough. And then baby steps and writing down. It's not, I'm going to buy a car, I'm going to move. It's like, well, first I need to figure out where I want to move. I have to have the baby steps, and then I have to write them down, and then I need to cross them off so I know that I'm accomplishing something.
Yes. Okay. So you raised several good points. Number one is vision of having what it is that we would like to achieve, who we would like to be. I mean, we talked about this at the beginning of the pandemic. We're going to be talking about this episode for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And when we reflect back on who we became or who we were, how we acted during this time, we want to have something good to say. We don't want to say, oh my gosh, I was like, a screaming shrew. We want to be able to say something good about ourselves. So we have to have an aspiration. We need to have a vision of what is it I would like to do, because it's very hard to stick to something if we don't even know why we're sticking to it. It's like, what is it we're sticking to? Why are we sticking? Otherwise, it's just being stubborn. I need to have a vision of what it is I'm aiming for. And at the same time, I need to have a process. So the baby steps need to be somewhat defined. Sometimes they're defined by what actually happens to me any given day. Like I won't say they're self-defined, but they come to us without us knowing. And sometimes they're decisions that we make. And that gets us also to the place that we are in for today. So today, within the week of Netzach, we are on the day of Gevura. Gevura is about definition, defining, discipline, how we exercise discipline and definition. Like you said, even making notes. And I'm the type of person who, at the end of the day, make a list of the things I did so I could cross them off so that I can see that I did them, because I need the feedback that I see the results of what I have planned to do, or even if I wasn't planning to do it. So having a vision, having an inspiration, breaking it down, taking it step by step, being able to have some sort of grasp of what it is I'm doing, and anything else that anybody else has found that has helpful, or that would be helpful if you could do it, even if you can't or haven't successfully. Anybody else?
Ellen, I was going to
Yes,
say,
Judy.
having a Muna and faith, and really sticking to your belief in that.
Very, very good. Okay, having Emunah, and I think that goes back to what we said before, is that God's ultimate wish for us is that we be successful. So that even in the case, like when we said in the Torah, when God says to Moshe, and don't even stop arguing with me. It's like, I didn't even start. That God is saying, argue with me. Come engage in this. Come engage in this, because you're going to get to a place that is even higher and deeper than what you're thinking. And that Emunah, which tells us that this struggle that we're going through and the challenge that we're going through, that we're trying to hang on to, is God's way of helping us become our best. And that it's not being done out of malice or punishment or hatred. Like people say, like, God is really testing me. It's like, yes, because God loves you and God loves us. So that emuna and the trust. And then that truly, that also reminds me that it takes us back to the word emuna is related to the word omein, which means to raise or to train. Okay, so to be trained and to be raised needs that we're all in training. We are all people in training, and that we thought we grew up, but it's ongoing process for the rest of our hours on this earth are all meant for us to continue becoming, and that having the emuna that God is helping us with that process. Very nice. Anything else anyone else would like to add to that? Okay. Another key factor is other periodic inspiration, because it is hard, even when we start off with an initial burst of energy and enthusiasm and excitement and commitment to something, it's hard to hang on to that. So sometimes people feel badly that they need to do something to help themselves stay enthusiastic. So I was talking to a friend, she has little messages and reminders on her phone that come up and periodically give her some sort of an inspiration. Reading something inspiring, talking to somebody who helps you feel inspired about what you're doing and reconnecting are all really important parts of having netzach. If we think about it, even the fact that the Jewish people, that we're supposed to come together as a community. You can pray by yourself. You can, as we've seen, you can, but it's better to come together. I said, even if people, as much as we have, laws about you're not supposed to talk during services, you're not supposed to bother other people, all those things. So I've had people say to me, I can concentrate better at home. So I think maybe I should just stay home. And that's not a new question. It's not a new question. And when the rabbis are asked, they say it's actually better that you go to the synagogue and be a little bit distracted, because being with other people is motivating. And I've had people say to me over this past year, they said, I lost my spiritual mojo. I haven't, I haven't been with people as much. I haven't done the things I've been doing. It's hard to stay motivated just by ourselves, and that we need to put into the system ways that we can motivate ourselves. It's the same thing as the company having, their annual retreat or their employee picnic or their getaway or whatever it is, or the team huddle or the pep rally. I was a pom-pom girl when I was in 9th grade. So our main job was to rally the troops, rally the team, rally the spectators, and get everybody to be enthusiastic about the game, because everyone played better when there was enthusiasm surrounding them. So even if somebody is very committed to what they're doing, they still need, and we still need, bursts of enthusiasm. We still need to have that be part of the process of how we inspire ourselves and can inspire other people as well in their journeys. So in order to stick with something, we have to really have that kind of a strategy to make it work. Anything else? So we have a strategy, baby steps, a vision, definition, emuna, that God is here helping us, that we're trying to get there, and how we can put this all together and to never give up. So it says that with the setbacks, it says never to give up. And then we could say, well, I'm going to try this 5 times, and if it doesn't work, then I'm going to give up. It says, who said that? So did I already share this with you, that the reason WD-40 is called WD-40 is because the person who invented it tried 39 times to make what they did, and it wasn't until the 40th time that the chemical turned out correctly. So that's why it's called WD-40. So it's 40 times is a lot of times. The kids always hear stories about Thomas Edison and how many times the light bulb and electricity, all those things, those are always such fun stories to read after the fact, but I'm not so sure how fun it was to go through it. It's so then I think, well, if we would think of ourselves as a character in our own autobiography, how much more interesting of a story it is to say, you know what, I tried to do this like literally 100 times before I was successful. That's actually a much more interesting story than saying, you know what, I tried it once and it worked out just amazing the first time I tried. Can I tell you, nobody wants to read that story? So we don't even want to hear that story. So why should we think that that should be our story? So the interesting story, the interesting perspective is not, ugh, how many times do I have to do this? But, how many times do I need to do this? How many times do I need to trip on this? How many times do I need to fall in this way? How many times do I need to make the same mistake before I get it? So all of these things, like, never give up on ourselves. Never give up on ourselves. So God is never, yes, Lisa.
I used to have a boss who would say, perfection is the enemy of good enough. And I think maybe it's a Jewish woman thing, but oftentimes we don't start things because we don't think it's going to be as successful as we want it to be. And sometimes good enough is better than not moving off the mark. So
Absolutely. And sometimes even something starts off and you didn't think it was good enough, and maybe actually it really was, and the other thing was not really possible. Or you think of something along the way. I am in that category. I'm in that category in a lot of things. But things like, I'm like, well, I'd want it to be creative, or I'd want it to be this, I want it to be that. And so I can't really think about what that means. And so then I don't do anything at all because I can't think of like what this outstanding version is of whatever it is I'm thinking of.
exactly.
Just get started with something and see where you get to. So
Mhm.
I did that in school too, with papers and projects, because I think like, oh, I want it to be amazing. So PS, the night before it's due, I'm up all night trying to think of something. And then with some adrenaline going, maybe I come up with something. And because I can't get started because of the perfectionist. So, yes, it's a very challenging thing. It's just get started, just do something and see what happens. So thank you for that. That is a very, very important thing when we're starting something, especially because I mean, there's a saying, our saying is all beginnings are hard. All beginnings are difficult, because anything that we're starting, by definition, that we're starting new requires some sort of a shift, reallocation of time, energy, resources, the way we think. That's a huge thing to start something. So there's the starting it, it's the ongoing, but to get started with even something. So I have to tell you, this wasn't exactly in that category, but just as far as like starting something, there were things that I had in my mind. I remember when I was really interested in observing the laws of mikvah. Steve and I had already been married. That wasn't something that was part of our life. And it wasn't something that we were like ready to do, but I really wanted to do it. And so I wrote down, there wasn't anything I could do. I'm like, well, what could I do to like do this? Because that's a mitzvah you really need two people to do. You can't, that's not a one-person mitzvah. Almost every other mitzvah is a one-person mitzvah, but this is a two-person mitzvah. I wrote down the phone number of the mikvah on the west side in my phone book. That was what I could do. And it was like a placeholder of like, I want to do this. So that when the time came, when we were ready, I remember Steve saying, he goes, well, do you even know how to contact the mikvah? I'm like, funny you should ask. I have the phone number written down in my phone book. And I remember and it had been sitting there waiting for the time, but that was the thing I could do. So something in the same line as well is, I've always had in mind that I wanted to make Aliyah since I went to Israel when I was 14. And I never in a million years thought that was going to be on a possibility. But a few years ago, after hearing a rabbi talk saying, if you really consider yourself a Zionist, you should have plans, even if they don't happen, you should have a plan to live in the land of Israel. And I thought, that's true, I should do something. So I took an little envelope, and I put a $20 bill in it. And I marked on the envelope, Aliyah. And I put it in my journal, and it sat there for 5 years. And here we are. I'm like, never in my dreams. I'm like, well, that was the only thing I could do. at that point was to say, this is what I want to do. And here's like a down payment. Here's a little, like, here's a something that just makes it concrete. This is what I want to do. So there may be something in your life that is something that you would like to do, and you may or may not be in the position to actualize all of it at this point. But is there something that you could do, write down, say, buy, something that makes it real instead of just a thought in your head? Maybe it's a phone number, maybe it's a website, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a something, you know, a travel guide. It's similar to when people, they tell you should make vision boards of things of what for your career, for if you're redesigning your house. What's your vision? And so that goes back to the idea of having a vision. So where is there something concrete that represents what your aspiration is? And without it, it's much harder to get it to anchor down and have any reality around it. And what's really crazy is that even with a very, very tiny anchor, something can actually come from it. It's just really amazing. I mean, who knows what the timing will be, but there's something about anchoring an idea, a thought, a wish, an aspiration. It's like taking a huge bunch of helium balloons can be held down like with very small rock, you know, just saying like, this is what I want. And that makes something real. It's a fascinating thing to do, really fascinating. Any other thoughts about this? Okay. So now we have, don't ever give up, but not ever giving up means moving forward in the smallest ways possible, whatever it might be, defining it, having an inspiration, having vision, infusing it with points of inspiration to re-energize and re-enthuse, that no matter how exciting and wonderful something is, our energy tends to wane. It just does. And that we shouldn't take it as a sign that, oh, well, I must not really be that interested. Yes, you are interested. You just need a little bit more. You just need a whatever, a booster, literally a booster, to kind of infuse something with more energy. And even when there's something surrounded with complete negativity, even if it came from God himself, that it's really an invitation to go deeper. It is never, ever, ever a true pushing away. There's no such thing. There is no such thing. And with that, hopefully we can find ourselves in a place where we can look around and see, you know, what are our aspirations? What are we hoping to become? Who do we want to be? And that every day taking another step towards it and fixing what happened the day before, making progress, seeing what's there. And we can just say bezot. With this is how I go into the Holy of Holies, with this idea, and to not have a negative interpretation of anything, even something that is negative. The temple's only going to stand for 410 years. It's like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. It's like, and then it's going to be even better. So it's like, where you are is only going to last for a certain amount of time. It's like, and then it can be better. So that positive, complete positive tilt and twist is not just a rose-colored glasses gloss on things, that is the nature of reality. And that the Kohen Gadol had to have that firmly in his mind when he would go in on that holiest day of the year, the holiest place on the planet, with he as the holiest person representing the Jewish people. So every day, and just say, bezot. With this, I go into my day. With this, I can encounter whatever negativity is around me, all the prognostications, all the things, you know, people are saying that, you know, the world's going to end and this is happening and that's happening. This doesn't mean that we're not supposed to take action, but it just means that we're not supposed to come to a negative conclusion and negative forecasting. So, you know, people like to be negative forecasters. I'm not sure why we'd like to do that. Maybe somebody knows, maybe, I don't know, maybe Daisy, you can give us some insight into that. Well, like what's with the human psyche here that we like to predict negativity? I don't know if it makes us feel powerful or what it does, but we're strange.
Sometimes people want to be prepared, so they feel like they have more control. If they predict the worst, then whatever happens, they can deal with.
That's
So
beautiful.
that's almost like a defense mechanism.
I love that. That is so true, right? So
Yeah,
if we can kind of anticipate, so that instead of having it just be anticipation so that I can prepare, it becomes a prediction so I can feel in control.
yeah,
And those are two different things. So we actually write about that in our book of living in the present moment. We have a difference between preparations and predictions and control versus manage. And that one is healthy and one is not as healthy. So that one is a defense mechanism and one is smart. So that when you make preparations so that you can manage what might be coming your way is different than I'm going to be making predictions because I want to be in control of it. And those two things are different. So if I want to be prepared, I'll bring an umbrella. I'll bring my mask. I'll bring whatever it is, my face shields, at least if our loan does, like whatever it might be, that's preparation. But that's the difference thing. I'm predicting that there's gonna be people on the flight that have corona and I want to control that and I don't want any germs coming near me. It's a different mindset than saying, I want to prepare and do whatever's in my power to do. What can I do to manage this unknown situation? But we don't like to say, as Daisy was just saying, thank you so much, Daisy. We don't really like the unknown and we don't like being out of control. And so we go into prediction mode to help us grab that. And I remember, I think we also said it, and I don't know if I said it in the book or something else I had written, that I remember at Coors Field when there was an accident with the escalator at the field. And everybody was like thrown off of it and like everybody was piled up and people got really hurt. As you can imagine, an escalator full of people and it breaking and people getting thrown. And I was like, I never even thought to ever worry about that. I have a new thing to add to my list of things to be concerned about. Concerned about elevators, that the shaft is going to break and it's going to whatever. I mean, I can think of things to be worried about, and it is the ultimate attempt to be in control. I'm going to think of every possible thing that could go wrong and be ready so I can deal with it. So, but you know what that does to you? It can make you nuts. It can also make you completely phobic because there's no way to actually control everything, even if you could think of it. So once that happened with the escalator, I was like, I need to rethink this approach here. So now it's reasonable. I check to make sure my shoelaces aren't untied, that they're not getting caught in the escalator, and making sure that people aren't pushing near me. It's like, that's about all I can do. And then whatever happens, I've done what I can to prepare, and there we are. So I think that this year has certainly taught us that we do not have control and that we can make preparations, but predictions, those just kind of went out the window. So it'd be nice if we could integrate that concept into our minds and be much more relaxed, balanced people. It would be very helpful. So I am a born predictor. I come by it honestly. Yes, growing up, I was always told all the things that could happen to you while you were engaged in different activities that would be harmful. This person got thrown from a horse and had a concussion. This person, fell ice skating. This person fell, whatever it was, there was some way to get hurt doing it. And, don't use a knife, you'll cut your finger. Don't get it in the stove, whatever it was, there was some way to be hurt. And I think parents, and I would say mothers more generally, are always the early warning system of reminding their children and others about how one could get hurt doing something, and to be careful. I mean, I always say to any of my loved ones, yeah, worrying is definitely not productive. And it says worrying is not productive. It is stupid. And worrying by definition is like when you have a hangnail or like a little piece of loose skin and you move it back and forth, that's called worrying it. The reason it's called worrying it is you achieve nothing. You go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and all you do is wear yourself out. So it says either you're concerned about something and you do something within your realm, or you let it go. Those are really the two healthy options. So not so easier said than done. Easier said than done. All right, ladies, thank you so much for this beautiful day of Gevura, of definition, having discipline, structure around our goal of being able to reach a place of netzach, of eternality, that we go one step at a time, and that we have an ultimate vision that we're trying to get to, and the steps along the way that will help us. And as Lisa said, worrying is unproductive, and certainly not worrying about how we're doing as we go, which is the other thing that gets us, in addition to the perfectionism, is worry. It's like, I'm worried this isn't going to be as good as it could have been. It's the flip side of the same coin of, it's not as good as I'm not as good, it's not as good, this isn't as good as it could have been, should have been, would have been. So all of that takes us out of the moment of really free choice and action that we have in front of us. So we can push those things aside and just move forward. We will save our energy, our psychic energy, our emotion, our strength, our mental effort. All of that can be focused in a more productive way, so that we really can have netzach. We really can prevail, and we can really achieve something amazing. So have a wonderful week. If anybody has any questions, any thoughts, or anything else to share, please feel free to stay on, and I'm happy to hear whatever you have to say. Anybody have anything else? Yes, Linda. You're still on mute.
I was just saying goodbye.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Ellen.
You are so welcome. Great to see you. All right, everybody, be well. Yes,
Ellen,
Dorothy
Ellen,
Melman. Yes,
what
Dorothy.
what I neglected to tell you when I said the children came, it was Stacy's children.
I was going to ask if they were, and I'm so glad to hear
And-
that.
And if all is well, in June, Charlie is having a bar mitzvah.
Oh, mazel tov.
Becoming a bar mitzvah, so we are so excited. And
So wonderful.
you know, they're doing so well, and makes the rest of us so happy, even though Sydney got a concussion skiing.
Oy, oy, oy. See, there's something to worry about all the time. I'm so
Exactly.
sorry. Refuah shlema. Refuah shlema.
So, but thankfully she's fine. So she's fine.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Was really a wonderful highlight.
I'm sure that's wonderful. I'm very happy for you, and you should just have lots of nachas from them.
Yes, thank for everybody. Yeah. So everybody be well, have a healthy, happy, good week.
You
And-
too, and we'll look forward to seeing you next
Thank you.
week.
And
Yes.
Yasher Koach, Ellen. Wonderful.
Thank you, Gabi. Thank you
Here.
so much. Thank you to everybody. And Liz and Sharon, it was great to see you. And Paula, I'm glad you guys could join us. And Esther and Etta, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Tודה רבה.
Bye-bye.
Bye.